not because everything's been in storage for 2 years, because it worked fine last time. So we're doing a couple things different. One is that Teams and PowerPoint is going to be on this one screen. Even though we have the other one set up, we're not going to have anything on it because we just can't get two things running at the same time today. The other thing that I need to make an announcement about is that we'll be recording this meeting. We'll be posting it to YouTube later. Unfortunately, another thing that we can't get working is our live stream. So while the Teams meeting works, live stream will not be up and running. YouTube stream will not be up and running today. We'll have the recording up after the meeting. I say this because even though you're all in the room, many of you may get texts from people who are trying to watch on YouTube. If you'll just let them know that we'll have the recording up later today, I'd appreciate it. Thank you very much. With that, Greg, would you like to gavel us in and get started this morning?
The meeting is adjourned.
Great! That was quick. Let's go.
Very efficient, James. The meeting's called to order. You want me to start?
Yeah, if you would give us if you have an update for today.
All right. Morning. It's okay if I take my mask off?
Yes, it is.
Morning, Kev, colleagues, and all our DOE, EAD head, and other experts. Welcome to our members of the public and others who are joining us in person or via social media, although we just learned that may not be, at least right now. Well, I'm looking forward to starting with our new CAP colleagues at the upcoming orientation in February, and then our first full board meeting in March. I'll always remember this group of 6 survivors fondly. This group persisted through the emergence of a novel, deadly virus, learning how to conduct meetings virtually, and what can generously be called stifling bureaucratic red tape. Thank you, Phyllis, Candace, Andre, and Charles. We have several important top updates today. In addition to DOE, EPA, and South Carolina Department of Health and Environmental Control, DHEC, I did this in just a second. We'll be hearing about the transuranic waste program and the liquid waste program, as well as CAB favorite, the Savannah River Ecology. But we also have a chance to meet for the first time Dave Olson, President of Savannah River Mission Completion, new master contractor. Welcome, Mr. Olson. Look forward to meeting and talking with you. Well, broadly, I've been thinking for quite a while about how quickly we in the CAB slip into acronyms, technical terms, and other jargon during our discussions. We're all acutely aware of it. And I've been thinking about how doing this affects the public's understanding of what we on the CAB do, and more importantly, what SRS is doing regarding the environmental management program. YouTube indicates that some of our meetings have been viewed thousands of times. So yes, people here are efficient discussions, and they sometimes might be characterized less generously as scientific ease or even geeks. And indeed, this will particularly be the case for our new CAB colleagues who join us next month.
That's for you.
And if these viewers and new colleagues are anything like I was when I joined the CAB, they're constantly trying to play catch-up during presentation discussions, to understand the terms, and more importantly, the broader significance. What they mean for the big picture regarding the safe cleanup of the legacy of nuclear weapons development and energy research at SRS. So, for this coming year, I'd like us to be particularly sensitive to what we think the public we represent does and doesn't understand in our meeting. If the technical terms or concepts start flying during this or any of our meetings, and you think there's a good chance that people don't have even a flicker of an idea about what the term means or its significance, then I hope you'll join me and help out periodically by asking clarifying questions. Ask for a basic definition that's comprehensible in terms. Ask how the project fits in the bigger cleanup mission of SRS. I believe this will make an important difference in the public's understanding of what we in the SRS Environmental Program manage. Finally, I apologize in advance. I'm going to have to step out of our meeting briefly this morning about 10 and again about 2:30 for a couple of important meetings. I know you'll miss me, but I should only be gone for a short time in any case. Thank you, James, Tanner, and team for so capably coordinating our CAB efforts today, and every day for that matter. Thank you again, CAB colleagues, for volunteering your time for this important work. Have a great meeting. And with that, I'll turn the floor back over to James.
Okay, so this morning we've got a lot of great updates. We'll be hearing from DOE and then South Carolina, EPA and South Carolina DHEC, as Greg mentioned. Bert Krauts for us has a great update on transuranic waste that he was pretty eager to give the last time we talked about it. We'll take a break for lunch after that. We'll go into SREL. There were some questions about that about the last meeting, so we thought we'd build it into this one. Do a liquid waste status and then meet Savannah River mission completion. We'll take some public comments and then we'll adjourn pretty early in the afternoon today. Any questions about the agenda before we get started this morning? Okay, just some quick reminders whenever we go on break. Keep in mind that sometimes the microphones are still a little bit hot. I think they're going to make an effort to turn them down, but we'll make sure that nothing's on the recording. But if you do need to have a conversation, make sure you do step away from the microphone if you can. When you are making comments, if you do exactly what Greg did, speak directly into the microphone. If your head moves, the microphone needs to move with you, even if it's on a stand. Any questions? All right, Mr. Budney.
I don't have a question, but what I would like for us to do is just take a quick pause and let's make sure that the people who are trying to join us, that we're trying to watch the live feed and they're trying to transfer over to Teams, I just don't want them to miss Mike's opening remarks. If we can just take a quick minute.
Keep an eye on the lobby and make sure when they come in.
Heather, I'm particularly waiting on Weapons Complex Monitor. Do you have them? Because they've already texted. I invited him. Okay, you did. Okay, so he has the Teams link?
Yeah, she's just waiting for him to pop in.
Okay.
Can you tell me if Susan Fulmer or anybody in DIAC is on team?
Yeah, DHEC came in.
I think I saw them. Thank you.
Heather and Susan are in, so. And Craig. So everybody we care about.
Is there anybody else that was expecting somebody on Teams that we need to make sure we have? All right.
Speak now or, don't for a dog, at least let us know for sure. He's in? No? That's okay, we can take a minute. Cabiners, did you all get a chance to take a look at the presentations that we sent out? Yeah? Got a chance to flip through them in advance? You ready with your questions? Maybe? We'll see.
Is DeAndre going to join us?
He's supposed to. He said he would be. Yeah, Craig.
While we're waiting, can you give us an idea about the patients you have today?
Really what I want to do is get some feedback from the six of you on what you think would be helpful in orientation. We'll kind of cast out what we're thinking, what our vision is, and then we'll see how that meshes with what you would have found helpful. Because we try to craft an orientation that we think would be beneficial, but it's been a while, right, since we've done one. And so it would be a good idea to just get some feedback, figure out what you think would be helpful, how we can build something. Because we're bringing in a bunch of new people next month, right? And we're bringing in a bunch of people that haven't sat around a table in a year and a half. And we're going to have a great, big, large, robust board again, but we need to make sure everybody's ready to go.
How many new people do we have? Completely new.
Completely new will be 11. It was going to be 12, but one person actually had to step aside because she had some more pressing duties. She's a nurse and is needed right now. So we'll take a look at her membership again when things calm down for her.
Got 7 or 8.
Correct.
He said he's in the waiting room. I'm just making sure you've seen Heather.
Okay.
All right.
So we got Wayne now. I'm ready.
Okay. Yeah, good morning. Thanks, I'm excited about getting the entire full complement of our CAB members here in soon. So that'll be a great event when we get everybody together. I don't have a lot of new information since we last met in Charleston, but we'll cover what we do have. Of course, COVID's a big issue. The site population follows the curves for incidence of COVID cases, just like the regular community. So we've seen quite an increase in the number of cases we've had. Hasn't been any impact on operations. Made things, we have to pay careful attention to make sure we got the right staffing at the right time. But we haven't had any real impacts to operations at this point. The department did decide to delay the reentry plan that they had. We originally were supposed to start reentry January 18. That's been delayed by a month. So we'll do a phased reentry. We have 3 different groups. And so the first one will come back a month later, middle of February, and then the second group, end of February, and the final group will be in March. Middle of March, so that's the current plan there. Moving over to contracts, we're still working our way through the corrective action for the security contract award. As you know, it was originally awarded, and then it was protested, and so that process continues on schedule to reevaluate that award. The Immigrant mission completion contract was awarded in October, as we said last time. The transition started at the end of November. It's a 90-day transition, so it'll be complete February 26th. So on February 27th, SRMC will be in charge of the liquid waste program. And then about a month later, they'll also complete the transition of the salt waste processing facility operation over to SRMC. So we'll do that in 2 steps. First, the SRR to SRMC transition, and then SWPF will join the liquid waste program. And so that's all going according to schedule. No real issues there. We did announce a decision in November for an indefinite delay to the final request for proposal for the management operations contract. And so we'll work with headquarters to sort out what we're going to do for an extension for the current contractor and what kind of timeline we'll look at to recompete that contract. The Advanced Manufacturing Collaborative, we've completed the preliminary design in November, and we are about to issue the task order for final design. Once that final design task order is issued, then we'll be able to sort out exactly when we can begin breaking the ground over there and begin the construction process. And so look forward to working with all the stakeholders to get a date for a groundbreaking there. We think the final design should be completed by late spring. Moving on to budget, we're under a continuing resolution through February 18th. That has not affected any of our operations at this point, so we're all still up and running everywhere. And we're waiting to see the FY23 budget be submitted. And when that is submitted, we're planning to have a meeting with local stakeholders, both to explain where we came out on the 23 budget and to gather input as we begin to formulate the fiscal year 24 budget. In operations, HKN continues processing material test reactor and high flux isotope reactor spent nuclear fuels. L areas continue to receive spent nuclear fuel from domestic and foreign research reactors. And K area continues with 4-shift plutonium downblend operations in preparing material for WIP certification. We expect to begin WIP shipments to WIP of that material later this year. Good progress still continuing on Building 235F deactivation, where we used to process plutonium-238. We did complete 6 shipments of transuranic waste to WIP in FY21, and we have a number of shipments planned for FY22. In liquid waste, the salt waste processing facility did complete its first year of operations, and during that year processed 2.06 million gallons of material, and including the hot operation testing phase, to date it's processed 2.37 million gallons. We are working through some technical issues over in SWPF, number of plans to sort those out and get the system up to its operational capacity that we have targeted. We have had excellent communications between Parsons, the liquid waste contract SRR, and our new contractor SRMC. So things are looking up in that area. And saltstone production facility, total of greater than 3 million gallons in FY21 and 640,000 gallons in FY22 to date of decontaminated salt solution has been transferred SWPF. Good progress on producing salt. We continue construction SDUs. SDU 6 is in operation. SDU 7 is ready for operation, construction complete. SDU 8, we have all the concrete structure in place, and they're working on the balance of plant. And SDU 9, beginning to put up the walls on that. Targets to have all the concrete in place for SDU 9 this year also. 10 to 12, we have authorization to commence construction, but that construction won't start until FY22 funding is actually made available. In 2021, SRS made significant improvements to DWPF canister production by re-evaluating a calculation to allow more strip effluent into a sludge receipt and adjustment tank batch. So that creates the first super scrap batch, and that means more strip effluent is added to fewer canisters. So the facility is stabilizing more cesium per canister, improving the overall efficiency of the vitrification process. Poured 59 canisters in 21, and to date we've poured 18 in FY22. So we're working 10 tanks simultaneously, undergoing preparations for activities to support salt dissolution and removal to compile and qualify salt batches, and 5 additional tanks are undergoing preparation activities to support sludge removal. So that's, as we've discussed before, that's a big step increase from what we had done before we had SWPF. That's about 5 times as many tanks being worked simultaneously. We did grout, we grouted tank farm, F-tank farm diversion box number 5. We're working on number 6, which is part of our FAA agreements. So first structures that we've closed since we closed tanks back in, I think, 2016. There National Lab highlights, 21. Open the Critical Infrastructure Industrial Control System Cybersecurity Laboratory at the Georgia Cyber Center in downtown Augusta. So established an SRNL's physical presence in Georgia. Received the DOE Unmanned Aircraft System Unit Award, an award given by the Office of Aviation Management for SRNL UAS team, and been authorized to conduct unmanned aircraft flights at SRS beyond visual line of sight. The first issued by the FAA in the eastern sector at altitudes up to 1,200 feet. In soil and water cleanup, we met all of our FFA milestones last year. 71 of them, and managed over 500 permits with DHEC. And we've already completed a number of milestones ahead of schedule in fiscal year '22. Issued our annual site environmental report, which we discussed last time. We did get a major environmental footprint reduction and record of decision. It was issued for the final cleanup remedy for the lower 3 runs integrator operable unit. So there's a number of mitigation strategies or evolutions we had to take place in this lower 3 runs. And now we have a complete record of decision between us, South Carolina, DHEC, and EPA for the entire lower 3 runs. So that was a big deal to get that thing finally done, and now we know how we have to take care of that entire lower 3 runs into the future. And finally, working on the next high-level radioactive waste interpretation evolution for a material that we intend to ship out that guys. So I think that completes what I have, subject to any particular questions you may have.
All right. Before we slide into questions, Greg, a little while ago you had sent an email to me asking about the high-level waste interpretation. Jim Folk is here. He's going to speak to that briefly, and then we'll open up to questions for both Jeremy and Mr. Budney.
All right, good morning. I'm Jim Folk, Assistant Manager for Waste Disposition, so I'm responsible for the liquid waste program that we're going to be talking about a lot today. So specific to high-level waste interpretation, just really a follow-on. If you recall, probably several years ago now, the department took on that initiative to do this high-level waste interpretation so that we can define waste really by its characteristics, by its source, right? So you'll also recall, I think it was about 2 years ago, just a little over 2 years ago, Mark Senderling came down from headquarters and made a presentation on where we were at that point. So this is kind of the next step in that process. What has happened since then is with the changeover administration, there was a commitment to go reassess that high-level waste interpretation, make sure it was consistent with laws and all the requirements. That was a commitment by the Secretary during confirmation. And that has now been completed. So there was a Federal Register notice that was published about a month or so ago that looked at that interpretation and said, yes, it meets all the requirements, and yes, the new administration was going to continue to support that interpretation and proceed forth. The second part of that Federal Register notice was specific to Savannah River, where we're now going to take the next step. As you recall, we disposed about 8 gallons of recycled material, again, about 2 years ago. We're now taking the next step, looking at some contaminated equipment that we have that, again, we can't dispose of on site due to requirements, but we can dispose potentially that material at commercial facilities. So there's a draft environmental assessment that has been issued. It's for public comment. I believe that comment period closes February 4th. There was also a webinar done recently by headquarters staff on that, both of those issues, both the reaffirmation and our draft EA being available. I believe that's posted up on the website that you guys can go review. So what that does for us is it looks at really 3 different components of our contaminated waste, 2 of which are kind of legacy material that have been in storage for a long time that I just can't get rid of right now. So it's looking at a disposal option for those. And then the third stream, and probably the one that would be most beneficial to us, is looking at disposal of bubblers. Bubblers are components that are in the melter. They come out. We have to replace those about every 6 months. So it's an ongoing stream. And we've been using bubblers for about 10 years. So every 6 months we replace 4 of those. So they're piling up. And what I'm really looking forward to is if the draft EA goes through, no significant impact, we can start disposing those at an off-site location. So to really start giving us some flexibility, and as opposed to simply being a legacy, it is an ongoing operational opportunity where we can really be moving this waste these components off-site, and again, not creating a new legacy for us that somebody has to go deal with in 10 or 15 years. So that's where we are. Again, encourage you to review that EA. If you got comments, certainly submit those, but that's where we are in the EA process.
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks.
All right, any questions from the board members? Jim, we'll start with you.
Jim Gielkamp. Question for Mr. Bundy. How many glove boxes are currently available and in use for downblending plutonium? And how many more are, if any, are scheduled to be produced and put into service?
We have one currently that's operated 24/7, and we're working with NNSA. NNSA has a project to install 3 additional glove boxes in the K area.
Greg?
2 questions real quick. Thanks, Jim, for that update. Can you give us what is the scale of, are we talking tens of pounds that are going to be, obviously that's not right, but, tens of pounds of waste that's being reclassified? Are we talking tens of tons? What are we talking about in terms of scale?
Well, let me first define a bubbler for you, okay? So the bubbler, which is the key thing that we're after, is basically just an Inconel pipe that goes down into the melter. And what it does is we blow inert gas through there, and the simplest definition I've ever heard is if you think about having your chocolate milk and blowing a little bit of bubbles through your chocolate milk with your straw. That's basically the function of those bubblers. It just creates a stirring of the molten material inside the melter to give better distribution of the heat. So that's what it does. These tubes are about 8 to 10 feet long, and then what we have to do, because of the corrosive nature, we take those out. Okay, so now you know what it is. It's about a 10-foot long tube. It's contaminated with vitrified glass, and so each 6 months, 4 of those have to be replaced. So that's what I'm looking at. So if you look at 60 of those tubes laid across the floor, that's what I'm looking at right now in legacy space. That, operationally, where that is the benefit, and the benefit for me getting out of there, is that right now they just lay on top of cell covers and do WPF, because I really have nowhere else to put them. Whenever I have to get under one of those cell covers, it's like, probably my garage. You got to pick everything up and move it out of the way to get to what you want to get to, right? So that's the operational benefit of being able to get those out of there. It's not some gross kind of tonnage of material that's going to get out, but it's the operational opportunity to move that contaminated equipment out of the way once and for all. And that's for the real benefit. Okay?
We're not talking huge volume. Okay.
No, it's an operational benefit. And like I said, the best vision is put 60 of those tubes laid out on the floor. That's the volume that you're really getting rid of.
I mean, is that the extent of the things that can be reclassified in SRS, or is there a lot more?
Well, there's again, the broad category of contaminated equipment. So I've got pumps, I've got all kinds of things that, now some of those I can and I do dispose of on site, back over to Bert's facility here, right? But because of certain classification, certain thing it's been in contact with, I just can't do that because of the requirements for solid waste. So those are the kind of things we're looking at disposing off-site. But there would be other materials, certainly.
Thank you. Real quick for Mr. Budney, you mentioned the contracts. And I noticed in some of the SRS news clips we got, you made the awards for the contract performance here, it looks like in the last month or 2. And it looked like, I'm certainly no expert in this, it looked like the contractors all did pretty well. I noticed, for instance, at one point one of WIP's contractors got, 2/3 of their award, versus ours were all in the mid to upper 90s. Can you tell us real briefly, sort of as a review for all of us, what is your relationship to the contractor? Do you oversee them? Do you have authority over them? Do you tell them what to do? Do you just manage the contracts? Can you just kind of give us the basic idea of how the contracts fit with what you do?
Yeah, sure. So we're responsible for two things. One, oversee contract performance, oversee contract safety on the site, right? So and we evaluate the contractor in all those areas. And so there's a plan each year for how we do that evaluation. The contractor has that plan. They know what we're looking for. Typically, like on a management operations contract, there's a certain percentage that's an objective evaluation. For instance, we want them to process 6 batches of material through H Canyon. We want to downblend X number of canisters of plutonium. And so they get paid, their fee is dependent on how many of those items they get done. Now that's the objective performance on the contracts. Normally takes up the majority of the fee, somewhere between 70 and 90%, depending on what the contract is. And then there'd be 10 to 30% that's subjective, and there's where we watch for the safety, for how do they do their contractor assurance system, and a whole host of other factors. But they know all this ahead of time before the year starts. They have it all in writing. And we evaluate them against that standard that we set at the beginning of each year, over that period of performance. And then I serve as the fee determining official. So I am the final say in, our whole team helps evaluate, but then I have the final authority locally to say what amount of fee is awarded to contractors. We do review all that with headquarters before the awards and make sure they understand how we came to those conclusions, why it is we're awarding the percentage that we're awarding, and take feedback from headquarters. But the authority for the final decision rests with them.
And then is your role to monitor what they're doing and sort of push them along? Say a contractor gets behind on what they're supposed to do for the year. Do you say, hey, you're not on track, you need to step it up a little bit? Is it that sort of process? Or you're overperforming in one of the goals, so it would, we'd prefer you take some of those resources and move them to another goal to push forward? Do you have that sort of?
Well, we're always happy to see overperformance in any area, it's difficult to shift resources because we're doing different things, right? So it's hard to shift the H Canyon resources to, some other area because specialized for that area. We brief the contractors monthly on where we think the performance is. So there's no surprises at the end of the year when we award the fee. And so we do go through that process of, hey, we like what you're doing here. We're not as excited about what's going on over in this other area. I would say there's not a whole lot of pushing that has to be done with our contractors. They do a great job, as you can see in the award fee. The objective categories, we have a specific, quantitative evaluation of what they're supposed to do. They do exceptionally well in those, year in and year out. They hit those marks. So we try to ratchet up a little bit where they're doing very well. Once they get the thing figured out and they're making it every year at 100%, then we try to ratchet up so we can get a little more production out of those things. But yeah, that's basically how it goes.
All right, Charles?
First question is for Mr. Budney. You mentioned that the budget you're operating under the continuing resolution through February. If I remember correctly, your budget was fairly strong anyway. So with the exception of your holding work on the SDU unit, I think, until two budget, that one was waiting on. So you're actually in fairly good shape because the budget so good last.
Yes, we are. Yep.
The other question, I'm not sure it's for you or Jim. You mentioned that you had run 2.06 million gallons of salt waste processing. How does that compare to what you had planned? That seems like we've done fairly well.
Well, it's lower than we'd hoped to get done. We were targeting around 4 million gallons, but we ran into some technical issues that we're working our way through. But I think we got a good plan going forward to sort those out. They're not, I mean, the system itself is working as designed, or better than designed in terms of decontaminating the material. We designed it, I think, for a decontamination factor of 40,000, and it's running at about 400. So it really does a good job of decontaminating material so that we can send it to the salt stone. The problem we've had is some material that clogs up some coal esters that are in there. The coal esters help us recover the solvent. The solvent's very expensive. We like to recycle it through the machine. And we got some material that's been clogging those things up. But I think we're well on our way to sorting that one out so we can run it at capacity. You got anything else on that, Jim?
I remember that when it was still being built, it had major problems. Valves, something went wrong with it. It's not related to those problems.
Well, those, we preemptively replaced all those electronic control cards to make sure that the valves worked out properly, and they do. So, yeah, that was successful. No, it's unrelated to that. So, it is more material we ever processed before in a year, significantly more. Yeah, I'm not particularly concerned. I think we got a good team. We're going to get it sorted out and get the thing operating the way it's supposed to.
My final question was, you mentioned that you had 10 tanks in process doing whatever pollution, and you had an additional 5 tanks that you were dissolving the salts in. That seems like a whole lot more activity than what we had, a whole lot.
Yeah, we used to do about 3 or 4 tanks because that was, kind of production rate that you could get through ARP-MCU, because you got to get a lot more feed ready to keep up with SWPF. So we had to step up the number of tanks that we were working on preparing. And you got to have a lot of lead time because it takes 2 or 3 years to get a tank ready to produce that feed for SWPF. So we got a lot of them going on in parallel.
I know I've had a lot of questions about the tanks, and that's exciting to me that you've got that much activity in those tanks. Job well done.
It's all Jim's fault. I just watch.
Any other questions from around the table? Greg, did you have more? No. Are we sure? Going once, going twice? Mr. Richards, how's EPA doing?
EPA is maintaining. I think November, I don't know when our new regional administrator was appointed. Daniel, it's the last time because he always signs his name. Daniel Blackman. I don't know if you know him, but remember where I know our administrator came from North Carolina's program. Anyway, that means Carol Manell, our Superfund Division Director, had gone on to be deputy while we were having acting administrator. You guys don't know that's our political appointee at all the TA region. And so Carol's now back as our Superfund Division Director. Brendel Chafin is still our deputy. And I think you know. Glenn Adams is my immediate branch chief, and Kathy Amoroso, my section chief. Mike mentioned on return to the office, we had our political appointees were supposed to start going back in December, managers into January. Omicron, now that's postponed, I think 2 months. And we were originally supposed to be February ourselves, but probably now March or April. I don't remember if our lower 3 runs fraud was signed at a November meeting. That's one of our big targets. Rob Pope, any of you know, was for that for us. So getting that record decision, major accomplishment for us, lower 3 runs. And I'm sure Jim will have a lot more, but he knows we're very excited and ready to start talking new circular milestones for the tank program when that happens this year. I don't think I have anything else for us.
All right. Any questions for John? No? Seeing none? Okay. You know, you mentioned returning to work, and I was telling my daughter that I have to go back into the office more frequently now. And she's devastated, absolutely devastated. But it's wild because she's 8 years old, so she's in school all day long while I would be at work. In fact, she goes to school where my wife teaches, so not only that, I would likely beat her home every day. We couldn't figure out, why does she care so much? We asked her, Emma, why do you care? Why is this such a big deal? He said, well, the dogs will be lonely. Great reason, I guess. Great reason, yes. Her priorities are in the right place. All right, more questions for EPA? Let's move into DHEC, who is attending virtually. Hey, Susan. Should be this laptop here. It's up all the way.
Yeah, she's not on.
Is she muted?
No?
Susan, if you can hear me, we cannot hear you. Stand
Yeah, give us
by.
just a
I can
second.
see you talking. Hang on 1 second.
Okay, should work. Susan, can you try again for me? No.
My volume setting.
Can you try one more time?
Let me know.
Yeah, see, that's coming through there.
We're getting better. Hang on.
Yeah. Dude, I don't know. No, it shouldn't. It should just, like everything else that's not functioning should function. And it doesn't matter how many times you test it.
James, we could kind of hear her through the computer speaker. I think that's what she's coming out of. A little hard, but I think we could maybe.
We can hear it through the computer.
Okay. How about that?
We're gonna make it work.
Give it a shot, Susan.
Okay, how about now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right. Well, thank you guys. So I have a few updates from the HEC Central Office, and I know Grace Ann also has an update from the district as well. Don and Mike Bundy both mentioned the lower 3 runs IOU record of decisions that's available. Also have another document available for the public, it's the 6th 5-year remedy review for engineered cover systems. As John mentioned, the liquid waste milestone renegotiation is getting underway. Since spoke in November at the county meeting, DOE gave us a briefing on the liquid waste system plan Rev 22. So the department is currently reviewing that document, and the plan is for the three parties to get back together February for our first negotiation meeting. Also have a few updates from the REFRA program. If you recall, there was a permit, open public comment through October 22nd. That was the SRS draft hazardous waste permit. The permit decision for that became effective on December 15th. And the major items in it were the modules for the hazardous waste permit, the M area and metallurgical lab, the F area, and the H area hazardous waste management facilities. That permit also addresses the storage tank facilities, and it was closed, and it was moved to the post-care part of the permit. Looks like there's an echo, so I'm going to try to slow down and see if that helps. The REFRA program also issued a public notice in January. That was January 18th of this year. That is for the issuance of a temporary emergency permit under the South Carolina Hazardous Waste Management Act. The emergency treatment permit will be effective January 26th, and it expires January 31st. It authorizes on-site treatment of 21 small containers of approximately 1,400 milliliters of unused collodion 2 chemicals and solutions from the FH area and local laboratories. So these containers have formed solids that could be potentially explosive, and they will be stabilized for safe storage prior to transportation and disposal. But that is up for public notice currently. So those are all the updates I have. If there are any questions, I'll take them now before turning it over to Grace Ann.
Any questions from around the table? No? Okay. Thank you, Susan. Grace Ann?
No questions?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
You're muted, so
Okay.
if there are questions,
No questions from around the table. So with that, we'll go to Grace Ann.
okay, thank you.
All right, hi everyone. James, can you hear me? Hopefully we don't have the same issues with this.
We can hear you.
Okay, sounds good. Well, my update, and it looks like my video is going in and out, so sorry about that. My update is very short. I think that James may have already shared that our Esap report for 2020 is now available online. I provided him with a link at the end of December, so if you would like to do some pleasure reading, feel free to look at that. Also, we have been able to publish our Esap video online too, so you can go to the scdhec.gov website and you can just type in Esap, and it should get you to an area where you can find both our report and that video. But other than that, that was just my quick update, so thank you, James.
Thanks, Grace Ann. Any questions from around the table for Grace Ann? Saying none. Thank you.
Considering all the gremlins we've been chasing down, I'm going to guess that that's not going to be our last technical thing for the day. All right. Before we move on with our agenda, Bert, do you want to use the podium microphone or do you want a lapel? Podium? Okay. Any last remaining questions before we go on to the next phase of our agenda? Anything we skipped over, anything that's come to mind? Okay. Let's go into our transuranic waste update. Bert, come on up. This middle button is actually forward, and that one's backwards. Okay. Down here.
Okay.
Thanks, Bert.
Morning. My name's Bert. Perhaps that's me right here. I go by Bert. I'll tell you a little bit about me real quick. Born and raised in South Carolina, engineering degree, chemical engineering degree from the University of South Carolina, and just recently completed 30 years with the Department of Energy here at Savannah River. And as James noted earlier, I am excited about this program because half of my career, from basically 1999 to 2015, was with the True Waste Program. I don't have a lot of history I'm going through today. I could, but it's been a very successful program for the Savannah River site. And I want to just give you all an update today. I did check, the last time we did this was 2018, so it's been a little time, been a while since we've discussed this with you, so I wanted to give an opportunity to do that. We recently, at the Department of Energy at Savannah River, recently reorg, and I had the opportunity to be part of the program a second time around, and we got some exciting things coming down the road with the Transatlantic Waste Program. Carrie, who's with the contractor side, has been a big part of this program. Helped me with the brief today, but unfortunately she had an emergency, couldn't make it today. I hate that. Probably going to be a question or two, and hopefully I can answer it. Top one? Middle one? Okay, there we go. Well, I wanted to start kind of with the dry stuff. There's a lot of stuff on this slide here, but a few things just to take away from this for the audience that I wanted to make sure we kind of knew about is, so transuranic waste is really a DOE waste stream. And the interesting thing about this waste stream was the department realized early on that we needed to dispose of this waste in a geological repository. So we started actually segregating this waste back in the 70s, which was 20 years before WIP actually opened. So we started segregating this department-wide a long time ago. Didn't know if you knew that, but anyway, so here's a couple of the definitions of it. So one of the things is the concentration of the plutonium in the waste is what we characterize or analyze. So 100 nanocuries, I don't know how to compare that to, but it's a small concentration. I'll start really with the 92. So transuranic is really isotopes coming from uranium. If you know what 92 atomic weight is, that's uranium. There is, natural occurring uranium, and we wouldn't dispose of just uranium at WIP. It's a stable element, but the transuranic atoms and elements that come from it is what we're concerned with. So 100 nanocuries is basically the concentration. Anything less than that would probably be, for us, as low-level waste. It wouldn't be true, for instance. And then we want something that has a greater than 20 half-life. I know last time we were down at Hilton, we got into the discussion of 238 and half-lives of tritium stuff. But anyway, there are some isotopes out there that have some really, really small half-lives, and you can appreciate, well, if they're going to go away, there's no need to put them in a repository. So that's where they came up with the 20 years. There's a little bit more history behind it than that, but I don't know the specifics. But there were some isotopes when they targeted this. And then, of course, there's all these exceptions. And the only thing to make a point of that is, of course, high-level waste has got its own requirements. EPA has acknowledged true waste, and if there was a waste stream that's true waste, but for some reason, and I don't have an example to give you, but we wanted to not send it to WIP, we wanted to say, keep it on site and dispose of it there or something, we would have to work that with concurrence from EPA. Today, we've never done that, but that's part of that. And then, of course, NRC still keeps their, like I mentioned before, true waste is actually a DOE waste stream. So NRC still has true like waste, and that's part of their regulatory process. So those are kind of some of the things I just wanted you to just kind of try to understand with the true waste program. Clearly, the big part of it is it's a DOE waste stream, It requires geological disposal. We do that at the waste isolation pilot plant. The concentration is greater than 100 nanocuries. And for us at Savannah River, it's mainly plutonium contaminated materials that we'll talk a little bit more about. I wanted y'all to just get some appreciation that our waste is mainly job control waste, but these are the things we got to make sure, as you know, trash, you can get some other stuff in there. We got to make sure we have all that, and we do that. There's a very rigorous process we go through before we generate the waste to make sure we're not going to have anything that potentially create an issue with the container down the road, whether on the road or at WIP. And if some of you probably remember, we had a WIP drum defragation at WIP back in 2014, and we didn't do this. And that's what happened there. We had some ignitable and some issues with that container. So anyway, but we make very sure about this part of it as well. What I got here for a picture for you is the waste containers, which is very important on how we generate the waste, because we got to get it to the WIP facility. And with transportation and how they manage the waste to get it into the mine, there's only certain types of containers you can appreciate we can put the material into. The interesting thing is we started generating waste before WIP was open, and so there was a major, and Savannah River was one of those, there was a major repackaging campaign. And one of the problems we had with repackaging is we had some very large container waste, and we had a challenge on how we're going to repackage those. And we finally came up with this white box referred to as the standard large box. Now that's not a waste stream we want to continue to generate at that size, but in the history we had to come up with something to repackage a lot of the waste. And we generated a lot of these in our repackaging effort. And so I'll talk a few minutes, but we just had a recent milestone with this, which something, the timing we wanted to let the cab know about. This is really our major container, 55-gallon drum. We've been using 55-gallon drums back in the 50s at the site. We generate this waste. You can see some of these play looking on the outside. This was an older picture. We actually we have what we refer to as retrievable true waste. We actually buried these wastes from a safety standpoint till we could recover it and certify it and ship it to WIP. So that's what you see there. These are actually, behind here is the True Pack 3s, as we call it, to load them. Kind of interesting, but they're round. The drums are round. They call these 7-packs. We can load 2 of these. There's 6 on the outside and 1 in the center. Shrink wrap is what we do to make them hold in place. And then we remove the lid and we take this whole configuration here with an overhead crane, lift it up and load it in there. Pretty neat stuff. But anyway, so this is a major waste container. Then we came up with, well, what about, we needed some larger containers. This is a whole different shipping container. We didn't use this, but look at these. These are what we refer to as standard waste boxes. You can see it, they're round on the sides, of course, to fit in here, because these came after this. So we can put 2 of these, one on top of the other one. They're about the same height as a 55-gallon drum. And then when we have issues, since we buried a lot of this waste, you can appreciate some of these containers had issues with the integrity of them. We actually had to go repackage waste in them. A funny thing, and some of this is these guys were really good at putting a hut in one of these things. Then when we went to go repackage, there's no way in the world we can get a hut back into that same drum. So we would generate 5 or 6 drums when we had to go repackage that hut. And we would, aerosol cans, because of compressed gases, we couldn't use aerosol cans. And these guys would roll up these permacon huts and leave what in there? An aerosol can. So we would have to go and use a glove box operation. We'd have to go cut out that aerosol can, and of course we couldn't put that big old rubber, that plastic tent back in one of these. But anyway, so some of these drums, we would end up generating these kind of containers out of that during the repackaging. So that's just kind of a little appreciation of the containers. Let's see, going to the next slide. So where do we generate waste at Savannah River? As I mentioned before, it's mainly job control waste is what we generate at Savannah River. We've been generating it since the early operational days at Savannah River. We started segregating it in the early 1970s. and they came from operations. Job control waste is simply anything we generate as we've worked in the facilities. A lot of it is the suits guys would wear in contamination areas, tools, general supplies and stuff we use in radiovolatile areas type where there was contamination or potential contamination. We generated those wastes. We packaged them in 55-gallon drums. But here's here's some of your facilities. You can see it all came to the true. And I'll have a slide next on the overhead of the flyover, I call it, of the facility. But we basically managed it and brought it all into the Savannah to the solid waste program. But you can appreciate it came from our analytical labs, national lab. Some of the studies they do with plutonium. 235F, we talked about that back in December. It's going through deactivation, working over there. They generate job control waste. A little bit from the liquid waste, but not a whole lot. And then HB line and H Canyon, you appreciate that, processing plutonium over there. And then these two new facilities, as I call it. One is the K area, where we'll talk about it a little bit with the down blends, and Mr. Budney mentioned a little earlier on the glove box packaging there, and then the future pit mission is going to be a large generator. So these are the ones that will be generating a lot of true waste in the future for us. Any questions on this one? Just want to give you an idea of the facilities at Savannah River. So this is an aerial photo of the what we refer to as the solid waste management facility. It's in the center part of the Savannah River site. It's a fairly flat area here. And you can see we have a lot of the low-level waste barrel. This is an old low-level waste barrel. This is about 70 acres. We're currently actively putting the low-level waste here. But we buried a lot of the true waste, as we call it, burial, on these concrete pads here. You can see two of them here. There's a series back here. We had some over here. And then when we started retrieving them, we built these covered facilities here. We call them RUB. They're basically a steel tube frame with the canvas cover on. And they just turned out to be super efficient for us. We didn't really plan to have them long term. We were basically putting them over the areas where we're uncovering the material, the old buried true waste. But anyway, that's worked out real well. And today we use them. These are RCRA permitted facilities now. We actually can store RCRA waste waiting for disposal on that. Most of it's actually transuranic waste. It's not, we got plenty of capacity now. This is where the loading facility is. We actually went and used that pad after we moved all the waste and made it into our loading facility. And then we've just kind of folded things down. And this has been over a long journey for us, but we were basically choked full of waste. We had nearly 12,000 cubic meters of the waste. Went through a lot of repackaging and got to the point where we have a little bit left. Had WIP not had their incident back in 2014, we would have been finished with the legacy waste program. And so anyway, hopefully we're close to getting that done now that WIP's resumed shipments again. So let's just talk about how we go about generating true waste. This is one of the pads that I just mentioned earlier. You can see the structure as it is. It actually, because it's RCRA permitted, it slopes, so we can collect any liquids. The containers are on pads. This is kind of what it looks like. We basically have aisles and various things. Part of it's the RCRA permit. The other part of it is we just want to make sure we can easily get access to these containers. This is actually a True Pack 2 truck, and the WIP's in the background there. But anyway, so you saw the containers. So from a generation standpoint, we work with the facilities. The generators have to go through a rigorous training program. They get certified to be able to package true waste. They know what can go in it, what can't go in it, so they basically understand ahead of time what they can package. They package the true waste into those containers that are approved for true, and mainly it's the 55-gallon drums and the standard waste boxes. Those are really our two primary containers for generating job control type waste. Once they package it and they can store it there for a temporary period of time, it comes over to solid waste. Then we basically start a very extensive true waste characterization program. We actually have to assay it to confirm it's greater than 100 nanocuries. We x-ray it too to make sure we don't have any prohibitive items, pressurized gases, liquids, free liquids, those kind of things. So we do a very extensive program to make sure that we meet all the WIP WAC. Then we certify and actually work with the WIP folks. They're the ones responsible for certifying our waste. We work with them, they say our waste is certifiable, and then we ship it to WIP. I'm making it fairly simple, but I can tell you, to go through all this is a lot of folks and a lot of people touching the containers and the waste to get it there. Okay, so let's just talk about where we are today. And first of all, this was, I can't remember exactly when, but this was in the heyday a long time ago. But we, at one time, were shipping a bunch of waste out of Savannah River on a weekly basis. And so this was one of those rare opportunities where we had 3 different types of WIP shipments going to WIP from Savannah River. This front one is the large box I showed you a minute ago, SLL. This is what we call this a True Pack 3. This was a very lengthy permitted process, but this is more like a seal-in, but it has these lead shielded impact limiters, so if this thing ever came off the truck, it would protect the waste container inside. So that's why you see that little diamond shaped thing. But we had these containers by themselves are like 20,000 pounds with no waste in. So sometimes we had challenges just shipping the waste because the empty container and then the truck limit. We had to make sure we didn't have too heavy of a waste container because that was really what limited some of the waste shipments. But anyway, this is what we refer to as a True Pack 3, the box type container. We can put one of those SLBs in there. And then behind it is this thing called a 72B. It's a remote handle. You can't see it, but the best way I would describe it is it looks like a big dumbbell sideways on a flat truck bed. It basically had 3 drums inside of it, sideways, that when it gets to WIP, they put it in the sidewall of the mine. But anyway, referred to as remote handle because the whole operation at WIP, nobody touched the waste. It went in remotely, unloaded the truck remotely, went through a different part of the mine, and actually they just used equipment to put it in the mine and nobody ever touched it, whereas the drums, the contact handle, people actually in a forklift get close to it and move it and put it into the mine facility. And then in the back was our True Pack 2, which usually carried 3 True Packs on that. So this was one of our biggest days, and even with the weather, we still did this. So this was exciting for a lot of us to see this accomplishment here. But anyway, right now under the program, with the facilities I showed you, mainly the National Lab is one of the major generators. A couple of H. King and does a little bit more, a little bit of that. But we don't really generate much. 20 cubic meters for us is very, very little waste. To give you an idea, all these 3 trucks ship more than that in a year. So it's a very small quantity. We currently have, you can see, about 600 cubic meters. That's a combination of legacy waste that we generated back a long time ago. A quick little sidebar on this is some of this waste is from 2 off-site facilities. We closed Battelle Columbus, worked with the GAP here in the state of South Carolina. They allowed us, because we were doing making good progress, they allowed us to bring some waste in for some small sites that we closed. But anyway, it's a really, that's where we are with the legacy waste in the current capacity now. Plenty of room on the site for storing it, but of course we want to ship it. WIP facility really just 2017 got back into resuming shipments from the 2014 event they had out there. And so you can see kind of the history of what we've been the last couple, look at that, 4 shipments, 33 cubic meters. So again, what we generate a year in the I call it the job control side of the house is very small. We've already made some shipments this year. Who are these shipments though? were large container, those SLBs. We have 4 remaining before we ship 2. So we got 4 remaining of a legacy waste program that we repackaged many years to succeed. And I'm excited that hopefully the next 2 will go out here next month. So y'all are at the end of a very successful campaign where we're finishing what we refer to as the large box, because we had to go repackage into those large boxes there, that campaign. So I was excited to see these last 2 shipments. The ones we went out in December, we actually went to NRC, which is the only time WIP's ever done it, with our waste here in South Carolina, and was able to convince them to give us an exemption. What does that mean is we had some waste that had a little bit more plutonium in there than what they normally like to see. We had to do some special shipping arrangements with. We were able to do those because we were able, this was the last, it was funny, these were the last 2 boxes we repackaged. And we told them when we sat down with NRC, look, we didn't build a very elaborate repackaging facility. We use existing facilities to do this. And guys, we just need some help on these. We can't go in and expose workers to cut up. There were tanks. We can't go in and cut these tanks up. And so they worked with us. And again, all I can say to that is when you show that you can complete something, you can get people to get to the table and help you with making that success. And that's what we did. Had we went and asked them that on day 1 when we had 4,000 cubic meters of waste to go repackaged, they probably would have said, come back and see us later. But anyway, huge success there. We got 2 boxes left. We'll be the last 2 trucks out of here at Savannah River. Hopefully that'll happen sometime here in the next 2 months is what we're looking for on that. And that will close what I think was over 230 some odd shipments of this truck in this country. So huge success there, and it goes to a lot of people, a lot of folks. This cab was huge, and a lot of the recommendations and a lot of those earlier success stories here. So what I wanted to do now is kind of look forward for us. So you know where we were with the legacy waste program. You see we're starting to wind that down. We're back to just really getting rid of the waste from a shipping standpoint as WIP resumes shipments. But we have a new program, and we refer to it as the plutonium disposition, surplus plutonium position, and it's being done out of K area. Right now, there's currently 1 glove box who's down blending waste, and when we down blend the waste, we actually put it into, it looks like a 55-gallon drum, but we actually, excuse me, see if I can go back here. We actually put it into what we refer to as a CCO, a criticality control overpack. And the best way I can describe that to you, it's a small cylinder container inside of a 55-gallon drum. And inside of it, we have some cans with some plutonium in there that were surplus plutonium, and that's how we're going to ship that to WIP. So we're currently repackaging that plutonium, NK, that's what the glove box does, puts it into these containers that are WIP certifiable, put it into the CCO container, take it out to this pad here. We have the same type of equipment we had over in E area that we did all the legacy waste, and we do an x-ray on the container to make sure everything that's supposed to look in there is the way it's supposed to look, and we assay it to make sure we know exactly we don't have the less than 100 nanocure issue that we might have with some of the debris waste, but for this waste, we make sure we know the actual amount of plutonium in the container. And we're in the process now. We just had the EPA folks. First of all, we've done the NEPA for about 13 metric tons. So we've gotten that part taken care of. We're currently doing the CCO operations and the characterization I told you. And we had the WIP folks here last December, or this past December. They came out and verified that we're certifying and characterizing the program. I did it again. And so now we're into the certification, which happens out at WIP, and with the plans to ship it sometimes this summer. And I'm excited about that because I feel like we're doing it a second time. We started the legacy waste program in 2000. ER 2022, and we're getting ready to do a whole new program over here in K with our surplus plutonium. And it'll be a major campaign, expecting thousands of shipments from Savannah River by the time we get through it. 30-year campaign. I don't have all the specifics. I'm not, it's really a joint program with a lot of other folks, but I wanted y'all to at least be aware that we're getting close to that first shipment, because it will probably be something you will hear about in the months to come. So with that, I think I had just a question slide here, and glad to take any questions.
Jim Gill, Cap. I noticed that one of the items that you're prohibited from calling true waste is unabsorbed liquids. How often do you encounter things that have had or could have some liquid in it? And is that a big issue that you have to deal with?
We encounter it fairly frequently, simply because we have a lot of lab type job control waste. We have to solidify it. The problem sometimes is this waste, after we generate it and solidify it, especially for the legacy waste, it would sit on the pad for 15, 20 years before we got back, and some of the liquid would come out from the absorbent, and then we'd have to repackage it. We did have a challenge at one time with breathing hood tubes. These things would condense, and we'd get water in there, and we had a campaign one time, we were just cutting them up. Got so challenging with us on that. We had a particular waste stream that had a lot of tubing and stuff like that. So it can be a challenge to us, but from a future generation, we kind of know that going in, so we kind of make sure how we prep it ahead of time. We don't have that. But the biggest issue and it's not just true, the biggest issues we have with liquids is when it sits for a long period of time after we've kind of, solidified it, but we don't do anything with it. But it's a program that we do have to manage and continue to make sure we're doing a proper job with that. We did have some drums recently. We went through and did what we call a fast scan, where we just x-ray it real quickly, not under the WIP certification program. And we found some that had some liquids in there that we thought we weren't going to see, but we did. And we're in the process of remediating those, going back in and dealing with the liquids. So yes, it can be challenging.
And is WIP pretty stringent on avoiding any liquids or potential liquids?
I would say no. Relatively speaking, they're using the record definition, but we're now into a new era because of the event at WIP. Before it was just, we were more concerned with the liquid. Now we're concerned with what kind of liquid it is, with the heightened concern with reactivity, corrosivity, and some of the other concerns some of these liquids may have. We've got to look at it there now too. So it's kind of gotten a little bit more of a challenge because of those new requirements. We not only do we have it, but we need to also know where it came from and where we make sure we have it compatible with the other waste in the container.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. We'll go Charles, Candace, and then DeAndre. Charles?
Charles Hilton, Cab. Bert, thank you for the presentation. I think I understand the true waste program better today.
Okay, well,
been on this thing 5 years. I'm a little slow learner, but thank you for the presentation. On slide 6, you said you had 573 cubic meters of waste on pads. Does that mean all the stuff that's buried has been remediated, dug up?
Yes. That currently includes everything that we have had historically that we repackage, and includes everything that we've generated up to today.
There's nothing else buried that's true waste?
No, I would just go off on we basically started managing the transient waste processing program in 1970, early 70s. And that's when we started segregating true waste at Savannah River. But plutonium-contaminated job control waste, you can appreciate, we generated before 1970. We didn't segregate it in one of our major facilities here at Savannah River, what we refer to as our lab waste burial ground. We had buried transient waste there. and we grouted some of that waste in place and did some other stuff with it. And we just went through a very extensive circular process with the regulators and talked about, do we want to dig that up? That's would be very true. And some of the western DOE sites are still working with their regulators and potentially digging some of that waste up. We worked through the circular process and felt like with the regulators, we all came to the conclusion that that was just not in the best interest for Savannah River for us to dig that waste up. So everything that we started segregating in the early 1970s, we've successfully repackaged it. And one of the things we did come up with, as you can appreciate, as we generated waste a long time ago and didn't have some of the assay equipment we got today, and that technology-wise, when we went to go assay it, it was less than 100 nanocuries. So we had a large mixed waste campaign. We shipped a lot of this waste off-site to a mixed waste facility and did some other treatment with it through other facilities as we went through all of this. So that's the long answer. The short answer is we got through all of them, believe it or not. And we had some buried waste we thought would be really challenging. In fact, as I mentioned earlier in the regulations, we talked about coming to EPA and talking about that not going to WIP. But the state challenged us, and the contractor took the challenge, and we were successful with that. So yes, we have repackaged everything. It's currently in a compliant container, and what's remaining is ready to get shipped to WIP, and we're just hoping that WIP continues to come up with the number of shipments, and we can shortly here be able to ship some more of our waste.
I'm impressed with that. That's a milestone.
Thank you. All right. Candace?
Candace Cab. Does the surplus plutonium require the geological disposal as well?
What we've decided is we're going to disposition it through the TRUE program, which is our geological, but I can't really say whether or not we needed to do that for that particular material. It's just that's the disposition pathway the department's decided to proceed with that material.
Also, about how much can be shipped per shipment? I guess a weight.
On what particular material?
The surplus plutonium.
On the plutonium, what are you asking?
How much can be shipped at a time? Is there like a max or?
So what we do is, depending on the type of containers, you saw if this is standard waste boxes, we can put 2 of those in a TRUE Pack 2, and we can put 3 TRUE Packs on a truck, so we could ship 6 of those boxes. We can ship 42 drums in a TRUE Pack. We can ship 14 in a TRUE Pack and 3 TRUE Packs on a truck, so there's 42 in a shipment on the truck of those. So it depends on the container. And then another interesting thing is we can't commingle waste streams in a TRUE Pack. So, like for instance, if we generated a waste stream from the H Canyon and we generated a waste stream from K area, we couldn't commingle those into a TRUE Pack 2. We could actually have 2 separate TRUE Packs on the truck. So it depends on the waste, but the maximum is 42 drums and 6 SWBs, and on average that works out to about 8 cubic meters is kind of what we use rule of thumb for each truck. They can ship about 8 cubic meters of our waste.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And DeAndre.
DeAndre Davis. Yeah, Bert, thank you for the presentation. It definitely helped me being a new CAP member to understand the waste management process. One of my questions is in relation to the containers. What is the variation of the integrity boxes versus 55 gallons? Talking about the waste management of it, or is think of potential leakage, or is one better than the other, or are they pretty much constructed to be almost close to the same?
Ask that question again. You're talking about the container?
Yes, the variation of the integrity of
Yeah, okay, so, good question. So the 55-gallon drum, as you can, we pretty much, most of us, we've seen one of those burn trash in the backyard. My dad used to use one. It just has a lid on the top that's got, they call it a ring that you can kind of clamp down with a bolt, tighten it up, and that's pretty much what a 55-gallon drum from a robust standpoint. The CCOs actually have bolts associated with it. The container itself empties about 300 pounds. So it's a little more robust than a regular 55-gallon drum, but it's got a container in the bottom, or a plate, I call it, that kind of keeps that cylinder in the middle from moving around, because that's part of the integrity of the containers, that we got to ensure ourselves it stays there as it goes on the truck and as it goes to the mine. That's assumed that's not going to go anywhere. So yeah, I would say it's much more robust, and we pay a lot more for that empty container than we do a 55-gallon drum. Those containers right now in the steel market's got crazy, but they're over $4,000 a piece just for that empty container. So it's a fairly expensive program. The containers are very, in general, are NQA1 inspected. We go through the very labor-intensive procurement process for the vendors who make these containers. WIP manages that program. It's centralized. Makes sense. That way they know who the complex for the containers are getting. So anyway, but yeah, it's much more than I would say a 55-gallon drum.
Thank you for that. I want to also commend you and your team. This sounds like a very robust process that really takes a lot of input, partnership, and to make sure all the T's are crossed and I's are dotted. So thank you and your team for making sure we stay as safe as possible in this process. My last question is in relation to kind of what Candace asked. What type of communication is happening with DOT in the transportation of these containers?
So as you can appreciate, these trucks are going through various states from here to New Mexico. They have the most rigorous transportation safety inspections. We actually have the South Carolina State Police, along with the DHEC grad group, along with the DHEC emergency response, who inspect every shipment for at least Savannah River. They actually escort it to the state line. Not required, but that's what they elected to do, and we support that with them. And then along the ways, there are certain requirements to truck drivers. Of course, the truck drivers, that's a whole other story in itself, but they can't have any accidents for over 2 years. They got to have over 100,000 miles worth of road. It's just pretty, I mean, they've had a challenge with hiring truck drivers just because of the requirements there. But they do inspections along the way. Of course, the states at any time can pull our truck over and inspect it, and we communicate with them. It's got a transcom, so I know folks at DHEC can see where the trucks are on the road. It's a pretty extensive program. We continue to meet with first responders for training. We do emergency drills from time to time with the containers. So I would have to say it's about as well trained people, communicated, informed that we have for a program where we're putting waste on the road.
And have you had any challenges finding drivers with the way that things are happening now?
I know of nothing. We have a really excellent record with the whole transportation. I think they've done almost 13,000 as a nation we have, and it's been a super. I think we've had 1 or 2 wrecks, and I think both of them were drunk drivers that ran into our back of our truck. So anyway, it's been a very good program for us. We've been very, very pleased with what we have there.
Thank you, Bert.
You're welcome.
All right. Charles, you found a follow-up.
I'm curious, Charles Hilton, Cab, you're doing all of this by commercial haulers, trucks, don't do any by rail?
No, we don't do rail. The thing that I enjoyed about this, I got on it right when we started finishing up a lot of the lawsuits and made our first shipment, which was from Lannel to the WIP. We talked about rail for a long time. Actually, the federal rail folks asked us not to do it. Some of the facilities don't have rail, the DOE facilities. So anyway, we elected for the trucks. We felt like with what we wanted to do, that was the best answer for us, and for the most part, it's been pretty successful. We really haven't seen where the rail would be that beneficial at this point in time. But that's a good question, and I remember being in a meeting, and there were some guys from the Federal Railroad there. They were just kind of telling us how hard it was going to be, which that was my assessment. I said, it sounds like y'all are not crazy if we don't do it. So anyway, yeah.
All right. Candace, did you have any more questions? Nope, okay. Any other questions from around the table? DeAndre, yeah.
I do have one additional question. Paul made me think about it when you asked about the rail. What is trying to find the easiest way to ask this. When the containers leave, is there a process that they have to stay within a certain radius to being seen? For instance, if they're on the rail, then it's probably very accessible to someone wanting to dump a car, and I know it'd be hard to kind of open the container, but is that maybe one of the reasons why the trucks were chosen, because you can get them there quicker and they stay within the proximity of a driver in eyesight?
You can appreciate where the rails go through different parts of towns and other things, but I think one of the challenges we really had with the rail is the yards in different railroads. I mean, you don't have one railroad company from here to New Mexico, and I know we've done some low-level waste shipments, for instance. Well, I'm speaking from an experience standpoint. And they would sit in the yard for a couple of days until the next train came on, and they go in that. So you create a whole nother set of issues and challenges, and I think with the program, after we went through the lawsuits, I mean, the department wanted to get waste on the road, and that was probably the quickest way, and we've just been really successful with it. I mean, the Troop Act 3 was a huge win for us. We were able to figure out how to repackage a lot of our large container waste and get it into a container there. And that container, that was about 80 to 85% of what we felt like we would get all our waste into. So we came up with a shipping container that took care of most of our large box waste. And, it worked out real well. The shipping corridor and the states along the way have worked with us. And so I don't, now to go look at a rail is just not a feasible approach anymore.
Anything else from around the table? Bert, I had a question. We've talked a lot about risk, so I'm kind of curious as we're looking at the different containers here on slide 2, the standard waste boxes, the 55-gallon drum, standard large box, and then the true packs in the background of that one. Can you run through the different levels of PPE required for a worker to stand next to?
So I did not mention, but all of this is considered surface, minimal surface exposure. So, and that's what DHEC, one of the things DHEC do when they come out, of course we do it as well, but they go and they actually got a monitor go on the side of that, make sure it's less than, I think it's 30, can't remember, I'm sorry. Good question, but there's a standard we have to have, both from an operation standpoint with these containers, to put workers around it, and then from a shipping standpoint. So yes, but all of this is considered contact handle, which means these doses are very, very low to the point that we don't have any concern with folks being around these. Of course, we always practice a LAR, and you probably won't see this, but let's just go there just to look. These containers here, you see this?
Yeah.
The ones that do have a little bit more dose, we mark on the pad where they are and put these little magenta things there. And then before you come in here, there is, right on the inside, there is a chalkboard, as I call it, that actually has a drawing of the whole storage pad, and it tells you where the high containers are. So we make sure we never, get people to hang out for those. I mean, part of the law is shielding and distance, right? So from a distance standpoint. So good question. but that's one of the things we do, and we've actually, at times, we've had some pretty good ones, but by the time they get into that, they got to have a less than something centimeters. Again, I'm just drawing a blank today. But there is a requirement, and DHEC does come out and do that. They're independent to confirm those rates on those containers. Does that kind of help? I appreciate that, Ashley.
Yeah.
But yeah, we do take surface exposure on these containers very serious. There's a lot of things that go in on that.
I bet. Charles?
Charles Hilton Cab. Didn't I understand that these are only alpha emitters, basic, top, that piece of cardboard?
Most of our waste is that, but we got some that had some that has some beta and neutron. And that's where you get into, this remote handle stuff. You know, we actually loaded these things outside in kind of a remote shielding kind of approach we did. It's pretty neat. But that's what I love about us in solid waste. We don't have any money, so anything we come up with, we had to kind of figure it out with the existing facilities. But we basically did those in a remote fashion and got it into this container. And then from there, we'll totally have it remote. But anyway, I could talk about this for all day, but anyway, I know we need to press on. I do appreciate the question.
Bert, before you step away, Amy Boyette, I just wanted to mention one thing, and for clarification. You know, we've asked a lot of questions about the casks and the transportation, the shipping containers.
Yeah.
And I just want to make sure that everyone understands that those containers are certified by the NRC. They don't have to be, but, you know, they go through the certification. Also, the routes that the material takes, that is governed by the NRC, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. And the drivers, when Bert says we, in a lot of the cases that he's saying we, he's referring to the Department of Energy, not necessarily the Savannah River site. So I just want to make sure that we understand that these drivers aren't SRS employees. If I'm not mistaken, Bert, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe they're WHIP.
They are.
So I just wanted to provide those clarifications. I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to say.
No, that's very good, very good. I appreciate you. Yeah, we have NRC and a lot of the licensing with the transportation aspect of the program here. Yep, thank you.
Okay. Any more follow-up? See you done. Well, thank you very much. We really appreciate it. All right, folks, we are running about a half hour early, so before I go ahead and let you out for lunch, do we have any questions, comments, concerns, anything we want to talk about as a board briefly? Nothing on your mind? Okay. Tell you what, I know it's about a half hour early. Why don't we try to come back at 12:30 and we'll see if we can't get our presenters in just a little bit earlier, and we can start back then. So if we can meet back here at 12:30, we'll shave about 15 minutes if we can, okay? Thank you, everyone. See you at 12:30. Mute the teams.